Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's no microphone here or speakers, so can I suggest to those of you at the back, if you would do better, and it's not for me to tell you this, but you would probably do better if you moved forward, because then you've got a better chance of hearing the candidates clearly, and there are seats further forward. It's your call, but then if you don't hear, please don't blame me. Right, my name is Richard Buchanan. I'm the current councillor at St Wands, but I'm standing down at this election, and at 5:15, I was happily snoozing on my sofa when Karina, bless her, rang me up and say that your chairman couldn't chair the meeting, so here I am. So you can make of that what you like. Now the format this evening is that the candidates will introduce themselves for 2 minutes, and then we will have questions thereafter, and they will each have a minute to answer those questions. Now, initially, we are only they have agreed that we will only take questions from those of you who are in the electoral district, and if there's time afterwards, those of you who aren't in the electoral district will then have the opportunity to ask questions. So, when you ask a question, can you state your name and confirm that you're resident in this electoral district? And it's no good asking me what the boundaries of the district are, because I'm from St Wands and I haven't a clue. But I'm sure that the candidates will know the answer to that. So, let me get my timing equipment started. Right, so which end are we starting at?
Number one.
Start with number one.
So,
Number one.
if you'd like to fire away.
You're number one.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Tang, a Jerseyman who would be immensely proud to follow in the footsteps of my late uncle Cyril Tangi, who served this island as Deputy of St Helier District number 1 for 18 years in the 60s and 70s. My business is in St Helier, as was Tangi's Dairy, and for those people who go back a few years will remember it. Hence my standing for election in St Helier Central as a member of the Jersey Alliance. It's that time again with the beating of the same old election drum, and candidates all, one way or the other, saying the same thing in different ways in an attempt to win your vote. The island has many problems, and these will only be solved by collectively working together. How Jersey has ever got to this point is inexcusable. The housing and healthcare crises, the constant overspend on capital projects, with a lack of accountability and transparency. It worries me that we could end up with a huge youth and brain drain as the next generation face up to the reality of never being able to afford their own home. Housing is a major issue, and we need a clear strategy to provide for current and future needs. We need to support local small businesses, the agriculture and hospitality sector with their staffing problems, and make the minimum wage a living wage. I would like to see work permits extended from the current 9 months to 2 years to allow for continuity in the workplace and security for those who come to work in this beautiful island. I have overcome many challenges in my life, either personally or in business, but I have always fought for what I believe to be fair and just. We need to bring a feel-good factor and a vibrancy back to the island, along with the much delayed regeneration being undertaken in Bar Street. I would like to see an extension to Millennium Park and a clean and green St Helier for the benefit of all parishioners. I hope we can change the status quo of this and previous governments. To serve in St Helier Central and the island as an elected official would make me immensely proud, and I will always do my best to fight for the good of all islanders. I very much hope I can count for your vote on the 22nd of June.
Hi everybody, my name's Neil Kilby. I live in the district and have done for many years. I think it's a great place to live, but it's quite clear that we have here the highest density population in Jersey. It's not as pleasant to live as, say, somewhere as Kennervay, so we need to make sure there are plenty of green areas in the district for our physical and mental health. It's really important, and as a deputy we are directly responsible for the district. So for many years I used to have an insurance round in all the areas around here, and it is not as luscious and as beautiful as the other areas on the island. The reason why I'm standing this year is I've seen so much going on with decision making by the states that seems to be opaque. We have decisions being made that we don't quite understand. The process of which we've got a general hospital is confusing to me, and I'm an accountant. how you would normally do with something is come up with a business case, and you look at the options of different projects, and then you decide to do it. Unfortunately, we've done it a completely different way round. It's like instead of thinking about a holiday and planning it, we've booked a flight, gone to somewhere, and then find that we can't go in. You know, it's just ridiculous. We should not have spent the money that we did. I spoke to several other different people, and they said that we should have had a decision-making process that would have topped out at around about 4 million. And we would have been on the way to dealing with that. So I'm very confused by the opacity, the decision-making processes, and the simple unbusiness-like management of the states. For me, the States Assembly is incredibly important. It should have primacy. It should be the decision-making assembly, rather than what it seems to be at the moment, where the state's machinery takes over, and it's not the States Assembly which is representing you as people. So that's my fundamental issues. Housing is clearly an issue. It has been for many years, but we do have options. There are 2,000 dwellings available on brownfield sites.
Time's up. Sorry, I'll get control of this in a minute.
I could have still been talking.
Don't think so with this noise. Right, I apologise for that.
That's
Okay, are we?
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Catherine Curtis, a Reform Jersey candidate. My background is in business. I own 2 small businesses, and I've been the managing director of an international manufacturing company, so I'm used to management, negotiation and planning. My focus is on family too, and especially considering the shortage of staff in Jersey, we are keen to bring in free nursery care for 2-year-olds, freeing up those parents who want to get back to work. I was born into a political family, and I am a social democrat. I'm very happy to be a candidate for Reform Jersey, a party of effective, intelligent people who want to protect Jersey and improve the lives of all our residents. I live in St Helier Central, and I'm keen to see improvements in safe walking and cycling routes, more green space and clean air. My children walk to school, and it worries me that our children walking from our district up St Saviour's Hill to Grainville breathe in all the traffic fumes every morning. It's really bad for health and dangerous with narrow pavements. I believe the government owns most of the land on the right-hand side, the Vote.je site. So why haven't they made a safe cycling and walking route there? Well, for too long, the welfare of our residents has not been the top priority. Reform Jersey is the party which has consistently brought propositions to try and improve the lives of Jersey residents. Housing has become first and foremost an investment opportunity, referred to by government ministers as units. They are not units, they are homes. Reform Jersey has a housing crisis action plan. We will ban above inflation rent increases, establish a landlord licensing scheme, and release government sites for solely affordable housing, social rental, first-time buyer, and sheltered housing.
Time's up.
You were good.
Got it right this time.
You stopped what you were told. You'll never make it in politics.
Hello, I am Jeff Southern. I have been Deputy of St Helier No. 2 District for the past 21 years, and during this time I have worked hard to represent all residents, both collectively in the States and as individuals when problems arise. As a member of Reform Jersey, the only organised and effective political party in the States, I will continue to promote progressive solutions for the problems we face in society. In this short piece, I will focus on employment law, an area I have been involved in, having led the way on redundancy payments and the adoption of the living wage. For too long now, we have suffered from governments whose sole aim has been to protect the needs of the wealthy few at the expense of the rest. The current government, despite its promises in 2018 to reduce income inequality and improve the standard of living, has produced a low-wage, high-rent economy. That makes it difficult for the middle and low earners to struggle to make ends meet. Income support is used as a prop for poor employment practice, and the latest data on the economy shows more and more households falling into in-work poverty. Reform Jersey policy is to replace the minimum wage with the living wage, currently £11.35, before 2026. We shall act to end insecure working conditions such as 0 hours contracts. We shall undertake a thorough examination of employment law to introduce day one rights to protect and respect our workers. In short, I have the energy, enthusiasm, and above all the know-how to continue to fight for social justice. So please vote for me as one of a Reform Jersey team of 5 in Central St Helier. Thank you.
Good evening everyone. I'm Lindsey Feltham and I'm the chairperson of Reform Jersey. I want to represent you in the States Assembly and help you get the government services you need. As a working mother living in St Helier, I understand the day-to-day issues facing working families in St Helier Central. Reform Jersey is standing on a platform for change, and we have produced a comprehensive manifesto. This is our contract with voters. If elected to government, we will implement our Housing Crisis Action Plan, which includes rent regulation and support for first-time buyers. We will also bring in a landlord licensing scheme to ensure that rented properties are safe to live in and tenants are protected. I am committed to increasing the minimum wage to a living wage and cutting GST on essential items. A Reform Jersey-led government would also work to bring in measures to make it free for you to see your doctor. Government should provide the very best value for the people of our island, and ministers should be accountable for their departments. Waste must be reduced in the public sector to redirect public money to improve frontline services such as mental health, education, family support and care for those who need it. The 2022 election presents voters with an opportunity to pursue a sea change and elect states members that will put the interests of the whole community at the heart of government decision making. Reform Jersey is the only political organisation capable of leading such a change. The more Reform Jersey candidates elected, the greater our opportunity to make a difference. I would be honoured to serve you as a states member, and I ask you to vote for our team on June the 22nd. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Deputy Rob Ward, and thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. I've worked tirelessly with my Reform Jersey colleagues to bring Assembly propositions to improve lives and drive genuine debate in the States Assembly. We have worked continuously to hold the Alliance-led government to account for their failed decision-making. I have supported constituents throughout my 4 years, demonstrating the skills to represent and advocate for people across our community. You have the opportunity in St Helier Central to vote for 5 Reform Jersey candidates. This enables us to amplify the high level of support and representation in the Assembly. We stand for better housing, renewed school facilities, genuine creation of green space across St Helier, and stopping the uncontrolled development of unaffordable housing in central St Helier. And we stand for so much more. Our detailed manifesto is online and shared by our 14 quality candidates across our island. Jersey needs coordinated leadership, not the usual mishmash of confused ideas. Reform Jersey is an established political party, and we are serious about leadership and effective government. We have been consistent in pursuing our pledges from the last election, and will do the same with our 9 pledges this time. We have grown as a party, and with the key principles of fairness, compassion, and creating real opportunity for all of our community at our heart. We can build a better future and deliver a new deal for Jersey built upon fairness, an economy that works for all of us, and governance that is open and genuinely accountable. We offer a contract with the people of St Helier and Jersey that will prepare Jersey for the challenges of the future. I ask you to vote for me on June the 22nd, and when you see Reform Jersey on the ballot paper, to give your valuable vote to all 5 candidates. Together we will achieve more. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I am Karina Rouse, and I would like to start by saying what a pleasure and true honour it has been to serve you over the last 4 years as a St Helier Deputy. I've worked extremely hard in a variety of roles across the Assembly to ensure that you, the public, are fairly treated and represented. These roles have included being a member of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, where we completed 2 in-depth and extensive reviews of the mental health and maternity services on the island. Both these reviews highlighted major failings and issues in these government services, which led to a number of recommendations being made and implemented by government. I also set up and led the Political Education and Awareness Subcommittee in order to tackle the lack of political education in schools and the wider community. I was able to receive approval to trial a new scheme of work on Jersey politics in schools. And in the last year, I was elected Chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee, which is responsible for the procedures of the States Assembly, members' facilities and the Code of Conduct. In this role, I was able to successfully implement several important changes, such as ensuring members' conflicts of interests are recorded more accurately and comprehensively, increasing transparency for you, the public. I am amongst the top in the Assembly to ask questions, holding the government to account, and have contributed to several government policy boards. If re-elected, I, along with the team, will continue to advocate for and represent you to the best of our abilities, ensuring fairness, equality and transparency across all of our public services and our laws. Jersey needs people who will listen and have a record of working together effectively as a team to achieve the best outcomes for our islanders. I hope that I have shown myself to be one of those people, a dedicated, diligent worker who is proactive, responsive, always approachable and ready to take your call. Please vote for me and the rest of the Reform Jersey team in St Helier Central. Together we will achieve more and be able to better support you. Thank you.
Good evening everybody, my name is Julie Waldman. I've never done politics before. I don't have a degree, but I've got a degree in life. At the age of 12, Jersey girl, was sent away to Ireland and didn't get to see my dad for 5 long years. My dad drove a taxi, he worked damn hard to give me and my twin sister in the back the chances that he never had. When I came back 7 years ago to look after my father, who myself and my sister care for, with Parkinson's, I was so shocked at how this island has changed in those years. If my grandfather and my granny could see the changes that we have created on this island, they would be absolutely devastated. I am standing here, facing all of you to say one thing. The Jersey Liberal Conservatives, with the Progress Party together, we will get this sorted. In 1 minute, I can't tell you everything we're going to do, but what we do have is a fantastic document, which is our Bible, and we will stand by that Bible. And if you would like to take a copy at the end of this conversation, please do so, and please come and chat to me. I'm not perfect, but I'll tell you something. I will work 24/7 to get these changes done for our young generation and for our elders, because you know what, we've got a beautiful island, but we've got to fix this, and we've got to fix it now. Please vote for me, because I will not let you down. Thank you.
So hang on a second. This is the first candidate that's finished 4 times, so I'm not quite sure what to do now.
We need a teenager.
Right, I think I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. My apologies.
That's all right.
Do start.
Good evening and welcome. My name is John Baker, and I'd like to tell you a bit about myself and what I intend to do. I'm a Jersey-born independent candidate who lives and works in St Helier. I've worked voluntarily for the parish for over 30 years. I'm very passionate about improving the lives of the residents of St Helier. I'm not tied nor affiliated to any party, but stand on my own principles, which include making St Helier a more pleasant place in which to live and work, better facilities, particularly for families and young people, more nurseries and schools, open spaces, pocket parks and playgrounds, greener, cleaner streets with safe areas for children to play, The town should be a safe place to walk through at any time of day. The town needs improved transport links, frequent hopper bus services, a park and ride facility, better routes for cyclists and safer routes for children to walk and cycle to school. Our dependency on the car has reached unmanageable proportions. The amount of traffic that passes through town causes continuous pollution and it increases respiratory problems in the young. We need to consider greener methods of transport for people of all ages and abilities. We need better car parking facilities on the outskirts of town, particularly for shoppers. We must extend the Millennium Town Park and improve facilities for young children. From an island's point of view, we must do much more to protect our environment and its biodiversity. It is essential we look at renewable energy alternatives to fossil fuels and sustainable forms of transport, such as electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles. Please give me your vote. My name is John Baker. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm suffering from not being a teenager, sadly. Perhaps in the next generation. Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's now question time. Now, can I just make a couple of points? If you're asking a question, can you make sure it's a question, not a statement? I will stop you if you go on for too long. And when you ask a question, can you make sure it's a question that's directed to all the candidates, not just one in particular? Because I will not be allowing questions that are directed at just one candidate, because it's not fair to everyone else. And when you ask your question, can you just state your name and confirm that you're a member, you belong or live in this electoral district? So far away. Who would like to ask the first one? Blimey, can't all be that shy.
Do you want to give some suggestions?
No.
Oh.
Not really, no. No, I don't. I'm supposed to be independent. Jolly good, right, far away.
I'm not allowed to address this to a candidate, but it is a general question. If you look at the...
Sorry, could you state your name first?
Julian Rogers, and I live here.
Great, thank you.
If you look at the Alliance posters, it says innovative education for all. You can see I'm slightly above the age of 23. How does that apply to me? Can I go to university and take another degree? Where's the for all bit coming? And what do the other candidates think the same thing? Because it is extremely difficult in this island, once you've left school, to get any state help at all in further education.
Thanks. Right, if I can start with you. Yeah, and you, just to remind all candidates, you have a minute to answer this, and I will stop you at the end of it. So far away.
Well, personally, I've always felt that I've got 3 grown-up children who all went to university in the UK. Sorry, 2 of the 3 went to university in the UK. In some ways, I would have preferred it if they'd been able to stay here and go on to further education, maybe at Highlands. I've always felt that maybe we could have had some form of a university for higher education in Jersey. I don't know if that would work. Highlands does a fairly good job, but it's a pretty outdated setup up there, and in need of, like a lot of things in Jersey, of modernisation. I think not only for teenagers who maybe don't want to go off island, but I think for you, like you said, sir, people who, I don't think we ever want to stop learning in life, and I don't think you ever stop learning. No one knows everything, and I think if we could set up some form of a further education facility at Highlands, I think it would be fabulous, and it would be a good way of keeping everyone back on the island.
Can you wrap it up, please? Thank you.
Right. Neil Kilby. I believe in continuous education. I was fortunate enough to get a local education authority grant to go to a grammar school in the UK. I then went on to university because of a local education authority grant. The government in the UK then changed that so that it became student loans, which is it means that it's universally available to everybody, but then of course all of your students come out with debt. So the wealthy gained from that more than anyone else, rather than the people that couldn't afford it. I then studied at Highlands for my accountancy degree, my accountancy qualification, and then I paid for my own MBA at the age of 40. I know, I don't look it. And so I paid for an MBA at 40, and I've paid continuously for education ever since for myself. It is important. Education pays for itself a multiple of times. So every pound, I've heard, every pound you spend on education comes back as £16 for you. There you go.
Thank you. I'm not sure, would the candidates like a 10-second warning? Would that be helpful? Yes? No?
Can you do it?
Well, I open my mouth and the words come out.
Thank you.
So is that agreed?
skill.
Everyone happy?
Yeah.
With that?
Doing it as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, fire away.
Thank you, Julian. I think several points here. Highlands is doing really well. We could do with more interaction with universities. I've worked with universities myself, Portsmouth and Nottingham Trent, and they are very keen to work with outside organisations. I think basically this comes down to the grant scheme. The grants given out in Jersey are too rigid, and when out door knocking we met a lady who's doing an OU degree she wants to become a teacher, and she doesn't get any grant, she doesn't get any support because she's working full time. At the same time, teachers are being brought in on short-term contracts, and we have lots of other types of staff as well, and getting all their rentals paid by the states of Jersey.
10 seconds.
So there's no sense economically in the way it's being done. Right. That was me before time again.
Sorry, you still got a few
I know.
seconds. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And it strikes me that what we've got here is a fairly meaningless phrase. It looks like they ended up with 4 words when they were after 3, as all good Tories tend to do nowadays. Maybe it means lifelong learning and lifelong training. Maybe 60-year-olds can indeed apply for a grant or ask for some support and receive education. It may mean that what we need, because we're facing the fact that employees will not come to the island because it's too expensive to live here, we need to train up our native population such that we can fill the skills that are missing. Could mean any of those things. I wonder what it does mean. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I thank Mr. Southern for suggesting that I might be 60?
I'm sorry, we shouldn't laugh that loud.
As your impartial independent chairman, I couldn't possibly comment. Okay, ready?
Thank you, Julian. Innovative education for all, what does it mean to me? I'm going to try and go through a lifetime in a short amount of time, starting with primary education. It's really important that children have good access to primary schools where they live, and here in this district we need better primary school provision, both around this Springfield area but also at the Rouge Bouillon area as well. Our post-16 provision could also be improved. We can bring together the more academic provision with the vocational provision and provide more choice at a post-16 level. With regards to university, I went to university with a student grant and a student loan, and I do not understand why we don't afford young people of today with the same opportunities.
10 seconds.
And then when it comes to retraining for people, we know that we've got skills gaps on Ireland, and I think retraining is important, but also it's really important for retired people as well to access.
Lifelong learning is a feature.
Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I'm not a teenager.
I know. It's difficult to tell, Richard.
It's quick.
Difficult to tell.
Right, far away.
Lifelong learning is a feature of a successful society and a genuinely shared economy where everybody has access. If you look, there was a full split between academic and vocational education, which does not work. It doesn't happen anywhere else in Europe. And finally, the UK is starting to wake up to that with things like T-levels. If you look at the post-16 report produced by my scrutiny panel that I chaired 3 years ago, we talked about a post-16 campus that needs to be built. The cost of that will have been £70 million. The cost of the Cyril and Marcon office block, which is completely unnecessary, is £100 million. There's huge irony, I think it's irony, that the government that produced those posters is now talking about lifelong education when it has not prioritised lifelong education in any shape or form. And actually, if we're ever going to deal with population adequately on this
10
island,
seconds.
we have to educate everybody at every age, be it 50, 60. I won't go on.
Thank you. And actually, I think this gives me a bit of an opportunity to talk about my own experience, because I actually went to university. I was considered a mature student at the age of 23, but I had to fight to get funding as an independent person, because you're not considered independent by the system until you're 25, which I think is incorrect. Having lived away from home from the age of 19, worked several jobs, often 60, 70-hour weeks, paid my tax, paid my contributions, it was quite daunting at that age to have to go and appeal in front of the education minister as to why I should be considered an independent student, and given some of the things that my colleague Lindsey Feltham mentioned there. So I think it's really important that going forward we put things in place that make things affordable.
10 seconds.
Because potentially we want to encourage lifelong learning, and it's really important, especially to retain those people on the island. Thank you.
Far away.
Learning is a lifelong process of all ages. Everybody that's retired that wants to come back to the workplace, if they wish part-time, should be given those opportunities. We need people. We need to keep our population the way it needs to work for our island. So I welcome the retired, the semi-retired, the retired, to come to the table and to sit with the young, with their experience. We need to look at Highlands College again, the way it used to work, training, apprenticeships. I don't have a degree, my twin sister does. Not everybody has to get a degree in university. There are plenty of opportunities. There is untapped talent on this island, which I see every day.
10 seconds.
We need to tap into it, and we need to tap into it as soon as possible. Everyone's employable.
Mr. Baker, please proceed. Yes.
Lovely to see you, Julian, and I just should mention I've worked with Julian. He's, like me, given up many hours to the honorary service in St Helier, and I believe a fully paid up member of the Reform Party. Not that it biased that question that you asked in any way towards the Alliance candidate. Can I just give you a really good idea? How about we turn Fort Regent into an educational centre, not just a university, but maybe a sports and culture centre, and we actually bring in people from all over the world. Jersey's a wonderful place to live and learn, and with the great sports facilities and the beaches and the sports that we can do, it could be a great centre for learning. It should be a profit centre for education, and with those profits, we should be able to supply means-tested education for all ages. Open University does, of course, provide some free service.
Right. That was the responses to the first question. Who would like to ask the next one? Well, you're very shy this evening. Far away.
I'm Robert Weston, and my family have owned the Sarah Hotel in the Cheapside area of this district for 50 years. I'm concerned about the serious lack of parking in that area. Our hotel has 54 units of accommodation, but only 11 parking spaces. As the candidates will be aware of the lack of parking in the Cheapside area and how acute it is, and that we have a garden and a swimming pool which could provide some 12 to 14 parking spaces for private vehicles, and we think it would be in the best interest of the type of establishment we run. would the candidates, if elected, support a change of use for this garden into 12 to 14 parking spaces in order to ease the parking pressure in the area?
Okay, thank you. Ready?
Do you want to start? Do you want to circulate 2, 3, 4, 5, or do you want to start at
I'm
one?
happy to do whatever you want.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. I'll go second.
So start at the other end.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
You happy with that? Everyone happy with that?
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, far away.
Okay, Mr. Weston, nice to see you, and I'm obviously fully aware of your situation and my sympathy for that. I think whatever a private individual does, and you've got a substantial business there to ease the parking problems in the area, should be supported. I haven't got a problem with that, but we do have a problem in St Helier with the volume of traffic, not just the traffic and the cars that are there, but the volume that passes through. And I would have thought it's a balance between encouraging your guests and others to perhaps use other facilities, to use other forms of travel, to maybe use EV bikes, EV cars. So it's not just about encouraging more use of the car and giving parking spaces, it's about considering the future, considering our carbon footprint and other means of travel. Thank you.
Far away.
It's a very hard one to answer because we go back to pollution, and I myself live in the central part of St Helier, and I have asthma. So I'm looking at the younger generation and their lungs. So although I think it's fair that you should be entitled to those spaces, I look at the Millennium Park and I see that used to be a car park, but look what we've got now. If there was a way that we could make maybe a compromise here where we'd say you would get maybe 3 or 4 extra spaces, would that be a compromise, or is it this way or that way? I think that's the question. If you want to come to me after and answer that, then I'd be happy to listen. But it's certainly compromise and balance.
I think, like it's been mentioned, this is a difficult one because it is about balance. I think ultimately I do sympathise a lot with the residents of St Helier, also being one that I almost feel like sometimes we're not worthy of having parking spaces because we live in St Helier, and actually a lot of the time, we probably need it just as much as anyone else to be able to get away from St Helier and enjoy the rest of the island. So I think this is a difficult one to balance. Obviously, there are environmental factors that need to be taken into place. I know that a lot of the spaces around that area are also taken up by work vans, which isn't ideal, but also people do need to get to work, and that is their livelihood. So I think I'd have to look at the case on an individual basis to assess whether I would support it or not. Thank you.
This is all part of a genuinely sustainable transport system, which we don't have because the government hasn't implemented any form of it. One of the things we have to do is to stop our reliance on the use of the car, and that means providing genuine alternatives. It took 3.5 years to get a £20 bus pass for under 19s, which has been taken up by 5,000 young people and will culturally change the way that young people travel and their reliance on the car. That's the sort of forward thinking that we need to have in order to deal with the parking issues in town. Would I say cover a garden and a swimming pool with a parking space? I would say no, because you shouldn't need to. There should be enough parking for the businesses and the people who are in town. And there should be genuine alternatives for people to travel around the town. The town hopper bus, which has started taking 20 years after Deputy Southern's proposition, I hope I'm taking his words away, is exactly that type of project that can really genuinely make a difference.
I remember answering the same question about 3 years ago, Robert, so I appreciate that this has been an arduous experience for you. I can't comment specifically on your planning application because I haven't seen it, and I think that every planning application needs to be looked at on its own merits, so I will talk a bit about parking in town. I do feel for your residents that don't have parking spaces. I also live in that area, and I am lucky enough to have parking space. And having a young child, I would find it very difficult to live without a parking space. And I know that town residents, the residents' parking scheme is extremely important. I think to free up more parking spaces within town, we need to encourage people who come in from outside of town to use other modes of transport where possible. So Rob just talked about a good bus service. Also active travel as well, I think, needs to be encouraged. But I can't give you an answer on your planning application, I'm afraid.
Right. And while we're talking about alternatives, and while we're talking about the skills we need in the States, one of those skills, I believe, is obstinacy. Because you don't get anywhere by giving up at the first obstacle, and there are lots of obstacles can be put in your way. So Rob talked about 3.5 years to get a free young person's bus pass. I'm talking about not 20 years, mistake, just 11 years to get the hopper bus. It finally arrived this week, for which I'm very grateful. But it required me chipping away every year, basically. And another chipping away was the funding for the Millennium Town Park. And if we want a green and pleasant city centre in St Helier, then that's a good start. And that took the effort of keeping going repeatedly every year, every budget, for a number of years, until we finally got the £10 million required.
Robert, as to the question, would I support change of use? I don't know. I mean, I would have to see the plans. I don't know. I think we have to keep the bigger picture in mind, which is that we do need to reduce car use, and we have to make St Helier much nicer for walking, because we probably all use cars at the moment. So at Cheapside there's a lot of traffic going through it all the time. It could be a lot nicer for walking through that area towards the park. As for the parking spaces already at People's Park, I believe they're supposed to be replaced, but I would have to check up on that, the ones that are lost. Planning, as to me, as somebody new, planning seems a little bit inflexible sometimes, so it could be that the people there are, maybe it's understaffed, or they need more staff, but it does seem to take a very long time to get planning decisions done.
Right. Hopefully I can answer your question a bit more directly than everyone else has. You're a hotel and you're having people come with vehicles, and that's what you're trying to accommodate. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right. So they aren't parking spaces that people have for the residents, or they're not parking people who are working in Jersey. You need that space that you're saying, I'm going to take the pressure off the rest of the parking space. So in my personal opinion, you should be, if that is more effective, it helps the whole environment. I am totally with everyone else here. We have too many cars in Jersey. Okay, we should be reducing our reliance on vehicles, but they're your guests who are coming over with vehicles that they need to have on site. I assume a lot of them are also for working here, workmen as well. So
10 seconds.
My personal opinion is that 10 seconds is more than long enough. No, I would think that you should be considered more deeply than it seems that you've been given so far.
How do we solve the love affair with the motor car in Jersey? This has been dragging on for a long time. I think we have doubled the amount of cars to humans. I think, Robert, I've known you a long time, I think as a planning application, I think it is seriously looking at if it's of huge detriment to your business. We've had a pretty rough time in tourism, and we want to attract people back to the island, and we want to provide the best facilities for wherever they're staying. And if people are having to walk from wherever to get to your hotel, it's not great. So I think we'd all like to see a clean and green St Helier. It's how you balance the clean and green against people wanting this love affair with the car. I don't have the exact answer, but I'm sure we can look in depth. Should I get left?
You mean if you vote?
solve the technical issues. As you can see, I don't have a license for an iPhone and probably wouldn't be let loose with one if I had to apply for it. So can I have the next question, please?
I'm sorry, can everybody hear okay?
I wonder whether we should close the
So I
windows.
was asking,
because of the
can
traffic.
we have the next question, please?
Should we select someone?
That would be unfair.
Yeah, no.
There we go.
Yes,
Good.
it's just there. Front row's doing incredibly well, I have to say.
Phil Rogers, I'm just over there with the earshot. What would you like the population to be in 50 years' time, and what would you do in this office to achieve that?
Where would we like to start with this?
Well, if we seem to be going from an, I'll start if you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this gentleman...
No, he doesn't want to start. I know he doesn't.
Oh, okay, all right, so you want to jump down one. Okay,
Right.
If you'd like to start.
Okay, very, very difficult question to answer. If we go back 50 years, it was 1972. Okay, and we were building states-owned properties and putting up housing estates left, right and centre, and did so for another 10 years, 12 years afterwards. So we have to look at this for what it really is, which is, you know, where do we stop? And is it possible to stop? It's quite ridiculous for turning around. I think in the 1950s we had 4 billion population on the world. We now have 8 billion. So we can't be unrealistic or think that we're going to stop the great tide, because it's just not going to happen. It's how we do it and maintain a beautiful island. The answer so far has been to put up high density
10
accommodation. So yeah, it's something we've got to look at, but also as human beings we need to be realistic about our expectations.
The ideal population, I mean, I can remember when it was about 80,000, and it did seem very nice then. There was a lot less traffic on the roads, and now we're over 100,000. I think it's more to do with how the density of population is managed that's more important. So making sure there's enough public services for everybody. But it does require management, and I think this is where there's been some failings over the last 20 years or so, that there hasn't really been the management. People have just been left to get on with it, and no structure to it, it seems. To know, we don't even know most of the time what our population is, and we need to have a register of who's on island. And I
10 seconds.
also know this has been looked at for about 20 years as well. It could just be people with social security numbers, and then we can have a work permit system that is adaptable to what's needed.
Time's up. Jeff?
Thank you. I don't think it's up to me or anybody else to pick a number out of the air and suggest that that is the ideal population. We have, as we have already been remarked, we have seen large-scale migration to the island and population growth in previous years. I think what's important, though, is that the well-being of society, and by that I mean newcomers and old-timers who've been here for donkey centuries, yes, or otherwise, and that should be shared as equally as possible. And so a stable workforce that meets the needs of the population, including the needs, the medical needs
10
for
seconds.
the elderly, especially for them, is what we should be aiming for. Now, I don't know what that number means, but that's what we should be aiming for, a content society.
Previous governments seem to have gone for a strategy of relentless population growth, and we all know that that's going to be unsustainable on a small island. What we need is a sustainable population, and I would like to see that we have net zero migration, so people will come and go, and what we can't have is exponential increases in population, because I don't think that's sustainable. One of the big fears at the moment is that people are going to start leaving, and that those people that are going to start leaving will be working aged people. People are very worried, older people are worried about their children leaving because they can't afford to live here. And of course, we need people here to do essential work, and we need people of working age here
10
to
seconds.
keep our economy growing. So we need to balance the population so we have enough working aged people and retired people as well.
Time's up.
Ready? Okay, we need a population that's appropriate for our need. It has to be inclusive, it has to be well educated, highly skilled, and it needs to be part of a high wage economy, because that's what we can have on Jersey. We feel in Reform Jersey we need to look serious at licences following people rather than companies collecting large numbers of licences that just get incorporated more and more, and that's where the population growth is coming from. That way government has more control over what we actually need for the island in terms of skills and what we have to then educate locally in order to develop those skills and have them for our needs. One of the big issues for small islands around the world is falling population, and that can happen very rapidly, and unless we get control of what's going on this island, we are at risk of that, and we will lose the wrong parts of our population.
10 seconds.
What we need to do is both control, but do that in a way that is the right thing for us and the right type of society that we want to build. That's what we will offer you.
Thank you. Try not to repeat anything that my other four colleagues have said is not easy, but I think ultimately we don't have infinite space on the island. So we do, I think, I agree, we have to probably look at net zero for the moment, but we also need to look at the current effects that things like Brexit are having. I know of a number of people who are professionals who are currently providing top quality services on the island who are having to leave. Many of them are Jersey-born generations, and it's just become unaffordable. So we also need to look at utilising the people that we do have here. I was out door knocking yesterday, and I came across a Romanian lady who's actually got 20 years experience as an A&E nurse, has been here for 7 years, and is unable to get into the system. So I think things like residency requirements need to be looked at, especially when we've got people who are highly qualified that we're not utilising.
There was a census report, but I don't know if it's correct. We have no real idea how many people actually live here. We waste a lot of money on people coming in as consultants. We've got some fantastic talent on this island. I see it every day. We need to get back to basics. We've lost our way. We need to tap into that retirement population that you talked about, because it's there. We need to invest in our island's talent that's gone to university, wants to come home, be with their families. We need to find that talent. We need to advertise for it. We need to bring them back. We need to look at the licensing. 9 months, but if someone's very good and they really want to fit into our island, then they should be given a 1 to 2 year if there is no one else to fill that space. And that's what we need to do, and we need to do it quick.
Richard, would you mind repeating the question? I was busy closing the windows.
I did think of that when you did that, yeah.
Who was the gentleman who asked the question? Would you like to repeat the question?
What would you like the population to be in 50 years, and what would you do in this office to achieve that?
Okay, so we've had a past government that has planned a sewage plant to be completed this year, 2022. They're spending £80 million, and they designed it for a population of 117,000. Now, what person with the right mind would have that plan and at the same time allow the population to get out of control? This is total mismanagement. I would like to put some controls on our population. We need a lot of conversation to do this, but I think a population of between 100 and 120,000 is about all that the island can manage. If we leave this out of control, by the time 2030 comes around, we'll have reached 150,000. And the price of houses will be, completely out of control. Our infrastructure will crumble, and so many people will be leaving this island.
10 seconds.
It'll just be incredible. So it's a big conversation that we've got to have, but it needs a lot of more work than the previous governments have done.
Well, I think most of the...
Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
You think I'm technically competent? You're seriously mistaken. That's
I
start.
think it's been answered by most of the other candidates. I think this problem will sort itself out on its own, because I don't think you have to worry about migration. I think just worry about the emigration, the amount of people that are leaving. I have it on good authority that in January alone, 3,000 Portuguese left the island on a one-way ticket. That's not taking into consideration the Eastern Europeans who all left during the time of COVID. To answer your question, sir, where would I like to see the figure? I'd like to see it at 67,000, which was what the population was in 1977 when I came back. Somehow we've grown by 1,000 people a year, which is how we've ever got to that point, I do not know. So I think it'll sort itself out. And as I say, my daughter is living in London, she's only 22 and does not want to come back to Jersey. So I think it'll... Sorry, I jumped in front of you. Huh?
No, I was just...
So was that my fault? You haven't answered the question, have you?
I have, but if you want another go...
No, that's just being cheeky.
Not even I'm getting confused.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that. Can I just ask, can we have the next question, please? Gentleman at the back.
Ed Jules, Central, St Helier. Cost of living. Just really building on the question we just had now. We've got living costs going up, 6 to 8% inflation this year. It's been a big issue in the States. I'm aware of several families locally who have already left the island who can't afford to live here. I mean, I guess my question to the candidates is it something you feel we should be addressing? And if so, how do we do it?
So who's asking this one?
Yes, I do
Whoa,
want
whoa,
to...
whoa, hang on a second.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
There's buttons to press and stuff. It's going to work the machine.
Yes, right. Are you ready to go?
Yes, please.
Okay, off you go.
Yes, we do want to address this. We have people that are born here, their roots are here, their families are here. They're important to the island. They're what makes the island our island. I would want to know when these people leave, that if they do, that they should be able to come home. This is our home. So I'm going to be very strong on that one, and people might not want to hear it, but those of us that have built our roots here and our families through generations should feel welcome, our skills embraced, and let's look at our talent for a change. We're always looking at everybody else's. Well, guess what, guys? We've got talent. Thank you very much. And I will fight for that talent, and I will support it and make sure it stays on island. I hope that answers the question.
10 seconds.
I'm very passionate about it.
We're going backwards.
Sorry, finished.
Which way are we going?
I think, tell me, which way do you want to go?
Well, I'm standing up, so let's do it.
Is that agreeable with everyone else?
No.
It was
Let's just
this
say
way.
this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does the cost of living need addressing? Absolutely. I think anybody that says otherwise is not living on this island. We've got a number of key pledges that will address that. One of the things that we're looking at is obviously affordable housing. I think that contributes significantly to people's expenditure. You're seeing families that are often working multiple jobs just to pay that. One of the things in our Housing Crisis Action Plan is to look at above inflation rent increases and it's establishing a rent tribunal which actually has funding allocated to it in the government plan and was something that was in place many years ago but for some reason fizzled out. I know of a number of individuals who have had at the end of their tenancy have had increases of up to 20% on their rent and they've been left with no choice but to look for somewhere else to live. So that's one of the things of the number of pledges that we've got there that would address it. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, because you've hit on a strong point for Reform Jersey, because a lot of our manifesto is dealing with the cost of living. So my colleagues are now sitting there thinking, don't say everything. So I'm going to pick on one thing, which is to remove GST off of food. It is a regressive tax on our food. We must get rid of it. It disproportionately affects those on low and middle incomes. All regressive taxes do. There's a very interesting point about GST at the moment in the government report. They've raised way more from GST than they expected because of inflation. It's a percentage tax. by taking off of food, what it's left on will raise just about as much money, and therefore the cost is even less than we've estimated, which is £10 million. So we can absolutely do it. It's one thing of many measures. I'm sure you'll hear about the others, but it's one of the key things that we have to do.
10 seconds.
The other really important thing is to take the cost of living seriously and not demonise people because they're having a difficult time. Too many people in the Assembly do that.
Hi Ed, yeah, cost of living absolutely top of the priority list. I was just reflecting as my party colleagues were talking. In the 1970s, my mum led a march down King Street about the cost of housing and the price of milk and food going up. And it seems that successive governments, despite the writing being on the wall several times, haven't done anything about it. To move on from what Karina and Rob said, we want to make our tax system fairer. The cost of living affects people at the lower and middle income levels a lot more than it does our very high earners. So we want to move to a progressive tax system which would see the majority of taxpayers actually paying less tax. But it would actually at the same time increase revenue so that we could pay for things like removing GST off of food and essential items, which again is a regressive taxation that means that people on the lower and middle income suffer more.
Time up.
Thank you. And continuing the same theme, I think in attempting to get down the cost of living, as it's increased so much recently, one good idea is to return to means-tested rents. It used to be, and perhaps some here, not many, but some, would remember the days when your rent, social rental was capped at 30% of your income, and that was seen as reasonable by just about everybody, and a fair rent. And we haven't got a fair rent now. People are paying 50, 60, 70% of their income just to keep the roof over their head, and that's a hardship that should be changed. Secondly, an inevitable cost of living longer and healthier is that healthcare healthcare is no longer catered for.
Time's up.
Well, my colleagues have talked about removing GST. I mean, food should not be taxed. Trying to tackle with the housing costs, we will increase the minimum wage. We pledged to do that, making our tax regime fairer. And one thing that I did recently is I went to speak to the people at the Salvation Army about the use of food banks, and they say it is increasing. The food is just so expensive now, and that when people hit some sort of crisis, so maybe they lose a job or they have high loans they have to suddenly repay, and they are having to rely on food banks. And I think that's quite disgraceful in Jersey that we've got people needing food banks, and that's partly because of the cost of living. Okay.
You don't have to stop and get to 10 seconds, don't have twice enough.
Can I have 10 seconds?
No, you can't. Sorry, not wishing to be impolite, but...
No's fine, don't worry.
You ready?
Yes, sure. Okay, trying to answer your question as directly as possible. When you say cost of living, are you talking about the cost of livings that we're seeing in such as petrol, fuel, food, all those things, or are you specifically talking about rental costs that are driving people out of the island? Well, there's nothing we can do about the cost of petrol going up. Okay, we can't. It's a global issue. The inflation issues that we're seeing, the cost of living issues coming from there are a real problem. We're trying to address what I think is a sort of hidden tax in Jersey, which is rentals. And the problem is the market in Jersey means that if somebody's willing to pay more for a property, then it will go up in price. So what we need is more people entering back into the market. So we need to have people who are considering putting their property back into the rental market.
5 seconds.
And that's fundamentally what we need to do. Of course, we need to build, we need to do other stuff, but that's what we primarily need to do because the houses are there. So let's get them back in the market.
Yeah, my apologies, I missed 10 seconds. You ready?
I think if we had the Governor of the Bank of England here, I don't think he'd be able to give you a straight answer at the moment. We're in the middle of a perfect storm. We've had Brexit, we've had COVID, and now we have a war in the Ukraine. I think there's people profiteering and using Ukraine as an excuse to profiteer. But let's not forget, we're a 45 square mile piece of granite in the English Channel. We have to get goods here. It's never going to be anything other than a very expensive place to live. I think if interest rates hit 3.5%, 4%, which they could do, you will see a levelling out of property prices, but property prices are never going to come down. We might stop them increasing, and hopefully, which will be good for everybody, but
10 seconds.
Where house prices are, without some help from the Bank of Mum and Dad, our next generation of children will be leaving the island, unfortunately.
Mr. Baker, I think it's you now.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a solution. And I'm not going to pussyfoot about. GST. In 2021, the states gathered £106 million from GST. There's no good pussyfoot about taking it off food and other essentials. Let's get rid of it. It's a regressive tax. And if you think about the number of people that actually work, which is not the whole 108,000, but somewhere between 50 and 60,000, you're talking about between £1,000 and £2,000 a year just on GST. That's roughly equivalent to about £40 a week. So if we could get rid of GST, you could get that £40 a week back in your pocket. Now to replace it, I would start a new tax, which would be a tax on luxury goods. So if you really want to buy that big, luxury, expensive car,
10 seconds.
There's more horsepower than you need. Let's put a tax on that sort of product, and that would also tackle the other problem, which is we've got is the number of cars on the island, and actually reduce.
Okay, thank you.
these
That's the end of your
larger
question.
larger vehicles. So there's a solution for you.
Have you spoken yet?
I have.
Okay. Has everyone answered this question?
No,
Sorry.
I haven't.
Not you again.
Encourage him.
And you're going to have trouble with at least one of the candidates, right? So everyone has answered the question, yeah. I find this quite confusing at the end, by the time we get to the end of the question.
No,
So,
you're doing very well.
Yeah.
okay, so can we have the next question from you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please? Come on, thank you.
Eric Fuller, I live in Cheapside. Would the candidates be in favour of a free health service?
Now, I'm really confused about where we start with this.
That's right.
It'll be me, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fire away then.
Okay. It would be great to have a free health service, and people should be able to get medical care, and it should not depend on whether they can pay for it or not. What we have pledged to do at Reform Jersey is to extend the health access scheme to people with long-term illness, so that those people who keep having to pay £50 or £70 every week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, some of them have to spend a fortune on the health care, and they are going to have affordable health care instead. So that's what we will do as a first step.
Could I interject? I've spent £150 in the last month.
Yeah, well, that's just completely.
Sorry, can I
wrong.
stop you there? It's not fair to the other candidates if we have an exchange on the floor. Can I ask, if you want to ask an individual question of a candidate, and this is for everyone in the audience, could you please save it at the end and then ask them?
We did have some exchanges before with
Yeah, I know, but
questions.
it's an unfair advantage to the other candidates, so I'm happy if you just to take up your time and answer the question. So, and I'm also completely confused about who's going to go ahead next.
I think it's we go this way.
Yeah, we go.
It's me.
Okay, yep, fire away, Jeff.
Right, thank you for your question, Eric. Yes, it's the intention of Reform Jersey to move towards having a free health service. It's something that I consider essential. The fact is that we made one attempt last year, and we had the GP fees reduced from £50 to £12. We were after £10, but they nudged it up to 12. And the other particularly sensitive group that might require and should be considered for free health service is young people, who often feel that they can't spend the money because they're going to go to mummy and daddy, say, how much can I spend? I want to go to the doctor. Oh, and I don't necessarily want to tell you exactly what's wrong with me. It might be mental health issues, but it might be something else. So free access to young people is something that can't be forgotten. Thank you.
Hi, Eric. As I said in my opening remarks, yes, I'm fully in favour of free GP service, and we will do everything that we can to move towards it. As you know, I've got some very tenacious members in my party that have been trying for years and years to get more affordable health care and free healthcare for certain groups of people. I know that you, Eric, you do listen to the States Assembly, but for the benefit of people that are in the audience that don't, there's a very useful tool on our website, reformjersey.je, where you can look at how states members have voted on those really important propositions, and why we're still in a position where we don't actually have cheaper healthcare for all. So yes, absolutely. I think free healthcare should be a right for everybody.
10
and
seconds.
It would also lead to savings, because a healthier community is able to work longer. They're not going to be off of work, and they're not going to be sick. So it's good for everybody.
Thank you. One of the things that we are doing in Reform Jersey is looking long term. We have to look at health long term. Early access to GP, early diagnosis saves an absolute fortune in the long term. So if you want to look at just the economics of it, it makes sense to make GPs accessible and our healthcare free at the point of need, because that makes people's health better. It saves lives with early diagnosis, and that's one of the things that we need to do on this island desperately. We've had short-termism for too long. I'll make a promise, we'll see how we go. We've been around for a long time, we're not going anywhere, we're just building, and what we're going to build is a community that is safe on this island, gets decent healthcare, and can be accessible healthcare, so that if you are ill, you're not worried about going to the doctors. There are certain members of my family would say I'm very careful with money, and therefore I won't go to the doctors and pay up. They've got a point, but even I resent paying £50 or £60 to go to the doctors.
Ready?
Yeah. Thank you. So I did try to bring forward proposals for free GP visits for under 18s and for pregnant women. Unfortunately, that was defeated. So I am absolutely in favour of free health care and health and access to GPs. I do think we need to maybe learn from the NHS when we do that. We are in quite a unique position where we can make something that's specific for Jersey. And I know that we were, for example, we used to pay for our scripts, but they were prescriptions. They're now free. So actually, there is scope to do that. And in the long run, like my colleagues have said, if we look after our health now, it means that people can contribute longer to the economy. I do think as well we need to be careful about our GP numbers, because we are actually our numbers of GPs that are working are actually decreasing. So I think whatever we do in the long term, we just need to be very careful and make sure that everyone's catered for properly.
I'm sure it's you.
Yeah, it's me.
Doesn't mean I'm not wrong. We're too far away.
Thank you. I'm an unpaid carer, £60–70. I've left myself, my dad gets care. It's not fair. Jersey had a proud record of almost immediate access, but that has been eroded by the freezing of medical benefit and the increasing contribution needed from the patient. Jersey is now more in line with the UK. The Coalition will give the highest priority investment in primary care and ensuring affordable access. The erosion of the health benefit is causing real hardship amongst the poorest who need free healthcare. We would also restore the value of medical benefit for those above income support levels indexed to health inflation. I'm an unpaid carer. I get it, okay? £60–70 is not fair.
Thank you. Mr. Baker.
Okay, so we actually do get quite a lot of free care, provided one's been in Jersey living and working for 6 months. Hospital stays are generally free except for emergencies. But I think the question really is relating to doctor's visits. And I'm diabetic, I have to go and see my doctor every 3 months, get blood tests, etc. And it's £50–60 a time, which is a little bit painful. Especially when I'm feeling actually not too bad at all, but it's just a regular visit I have to do. So I would prefer if we could have some system that is the costs are covered by government to some extent, but we can't have completely free doctors, because otherwise they'd be totally overwhelmed by the number of people that would just go along. I've got a headache, I'll go and see the doctor, or get a day off work. So there's got to be some control there. There's
10
something
seconds.
that needs looking at. Thank you.
This isn't my strong point, but there are people within the Alliance who are far better equipped, Phil Romrell being one of them, whose career has been in the medical profession. I sympathise with you, Eric, and I sympathise with anyone who has to go and pay a visit to the GP, and I think a friend of mine got slapped with a £75 bill the other day. On top of all the extra cost of living at the moment, and I don't have an answer to it. I say there's people much better equipped than the Jersey Alliance. I think the simple answer is, by the time we've ploughed £1 billion plus into our new hospital, there won't be any money left for free healthcare. So I'll leave it at that.
There is a big question. If we spoke to the doctors and the family nursing, who are third sector, so they're not a part of the government, they're arm's length from the government, and they are not treated in the same way that anything inside the government, such as the general hospital, etc. It seems that those people are squeezed. Doctors are independent businesses. There is no such thing as free healthcare. Somebody's got to pay for it. Doctors don't work for nothing. Medicine's not free. So what we've got to look at is making sure that those that can't afford it get medical care that they need. It is incredible that we are spending £800 million on a vanity project for a hospital which should really cost half that, and that we've got concerns like yourself, Eric, where we're not getting proper medical attention to people where they need it at that point. So that's a massive concern, and thank you for the question.
You answered it right. Has everyone's answered the question? Okay, just to make sure. Okay, thank you. And can I ask for the next question from the audience, please?
Go on, don't be afraid. Let's have some female questions.
There will be an opportunity, obviously, afterwards for you to individually ask questions of the candidates if you're feeling shy. But it would be good at least to get at least one more in before the end of the evening.
I have a second question, if I may ask it.
You may indeed, yes.
Don't mention the hospital.
No,
God.
Just new hospitals,
I won't mention hotels either. It's regarding Jersey's housing crisis, which the lack of accommodation and the resulting increase in prices. Under present planning law, the first stage in planning is to lodge plans and to pay a fee. In the case of housing applications, that fee is actually substantial per unit and is not refundable if an application is refused. Whilst paying the fee is appropriate, building homes is also very costly. So there's a cash flow question here which presently acts as a serious disincentive for many prospective applicants. To generate more housing, it seems that a fresh incentive may be needed to be considered. Would the candidates support a proposition to defer payment of the planning fee until consent has been granted and the sale of each home for which the planning is being requested has been completed? So the planning fee is paid after the event and not as an upfront cost that may be lost if the application is refused.
candidates. It was a long question. Is everyone happy that they understood the question?
Yeah, I am.
All happy you understood the question?
I think, is it in short stating that the developer wants you to put money up front, but what you should do is pay afterwards? I think that's a fair point.
Okay, so we're all happy with the question, and now the next question is the obvious one.
Karina,
thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Karina, off we go. Can I just stop? Okay, you ready now?
Yes, yeah. Thank you. I think planning isn't my area of expertise, so I wasn't actually aware of that. I think that's a really good point. I would agree with that, but on the condition that how those units would be being sold. Is it for investors, for example, or would it be for first-time buyers? Would it be affordable housing? I think all of those things need to be taken into account before agreeing to allowing the fee to be paid afterwards. I think it makes perfect sense that people, obviously it's not refundable, and I imagine they have to pay it again when they submit another plan. But I would like to ensure that whatever's being built is necessarily not for investors, it is for first-time buyers, and we do make it as affordable as possible for those people. Thank you. It's you. No, it's going back that way, isn't it?
Rob can go.
Yeah, I thought it was coming back that way, yeah.
Okay.
I don't mind.
Are we happy with that? Is that
I don't mind.
Yeah, because it was going that way.
Right, fire away.
There is a pre-planning process that exists. The problem is that I don't think the pre-planning process is good enough at the moment. So you're paying for something which is effectively inadequate and not giving you a real clue as to whether the quality of your planning application. So somebody put a planning application to remove a small piece of wall, and it took over a year to actually get an answer. I can empathise to some extent, but on a smaller scale. We must have clear planning regulations, and they need updating. The Bridge and Island Plan fudged the issue over planning to some extent. I see, absolutely did fudge the issue, and with the promise of better regulations, which still haven't been produced. If you are paying for something, you need to have the clarity as to what you're paying for. I get that. As for my concern would be that if you only pay when permission is given, it might drive permissions to be given where they shouldn't be in order to generate income. Not that I don't trust government departments or the government to do that, but I'm afraid we have to be very careful of that. And in 1 minute, that's all I'm... Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yes, there's any levers that can be used to increase the number of affordable homes on the market, then yes, I would be in favour of that. Speaking as a project manager, what concerns me about what you're saying is I don't know how much these fees are, Robert. Could you?
A lot of money per unit.
A lot of money per unit. Well, depending on the percentage for the actual, I'm just conscious that with a big capital build, you'd need to have quite a lot of cash in the bank to be able to do that. So I would be concerned potentially if it's a small amount of money that we're talking about holding off, that potentially the person hasn't got the cash in the bank to fulfil the capital build. But if indeed it was found to be an appropriate lever to encourage more housing on the market that was affordable, I would be in favour of that.
Thank you. Yep. And I'll start by quoting from our action plan on housing, which says that some commentators say that this is simply a problem of supply and demand, which could be resolved merely by increasing supply. It looks to me, like what you're talking about, removal of this charge, is about increasing supply. And the point about that supply is it depends what the developer wants to do with that property, as has been mentioned. And fundamentally, a developer is there to make a profit. What makes most profit? Why, single bed flats, luxury single bed flats. That's what's supposed to make a profit, and that's why
10 seconds.
What happens is that developments end up with single bed flats and not useful accommodation for the majority.
Thank you, Robert, for asking a second question. I actually grew up in a family of property developers a long time ago, so I did hear lots of complaints about planning even back then. I don't know much about the planning process though, so I would hope that the planning department can get together with people to discuss their plans first without there being a charge for a first meeting. I don't know if that happens. I do agree that the charge should be at least partly refundable if plans aren't passed, but there has to be a payment made for the work that the planners have done as well, so partly refundable. I do think also perhaps the fee could be paid at a later stage, but I would say not when properties are sold, but perhaps when the application is passed around that point. So yes, basically I agree with quite a lot you said.
Time's up.
Okay, it isn't the fee that's the problem, it's the certitude. So if you talk to the construction council and the people there, they say that they put through everything according to the plans and the rules and the regulations, and then somebody turns around and says, well, don't like the look of that. Okay, so it's the subjectivity that is the problem, and we need to remove that. In the UK, if you put planning permission, planning requests in, they have to come up with a reason why it's wrong. Okay, they have to say why it doesn't fit inside the rules and regulations that are there. We don't have that. Everything's sort of subjective. Somebody will look at it. So I know plenty of people who want to build lots of large buildings and estates, and it is not the cost of the planning fees. It is the fact that you've got no objectivity. It is always subjective. And would you agree with that? Sorry, interacting.
Yes, the answer is yes. I would agree with that.
Sorry?
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
I think we've all fallen foul, or certainly I have, and other people I know, of this wonderful planning process over the years. It doesn't seem to get any better year on year. What came out of the Construction Council meeting the other day was that we need an urgent development and a clear and a pragmatic guidance as to where we are heading. There's no forward thinking, there's no help. It basically, it's their way or the highway, and I just think the whole planning process needs to be simplified in layman's terms. The costs of submitting plans now, and then they're rejected, then you have to submit them again, and maybe you have to submit them for the third time. I sympathise with you, Robert. I know you've been in the business a long time, and
10 seconds.
I think it's something that must be high on the agenda for the next government.
Right.
Okay, so Robert, you're basically asking for a no-win, no-pay, but I'll give you a better solution, because I think the problem that developers have is the timescale, and a lot of people have put off developing because it takes so long to get planning. Now, if you could reduce the amount of work that planning have, and that's easily done, because there's a movement at the moment. St Helier wants to build a parish council, and that council can take on small planning matters. So anything from a Villax window to a bedroom extension over a garage, St Helier Parish Council could look after. That would take the burden of planning, and then the larger planning applications, such as the one you were talking about, could be handled that much quicker. And I think it's the speed of having a plan, getting it approved, or at least getting an answer, and getting that first shovel in the ground is much more important from a cash flow and from a returns point of view.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Well, this is actually one of the first jobs, if elected, I would get my teeth into. I would sit with the developers and the planning department and start joining some dots, because the ridiculous things that happen cost money. And it's the first time buyers that always suffer. So I would want to sit with planning and the developers, and I would want three things. One, affordable for our first time buyers that don't have bank of mum and dad, such as myself and others. Two, cost-effective building, and three, green, effective housing. And this is something that this government needs to get on with. So with planning and the developers, my very first job would be to sit and have a meeting with them and to solve this problem, which is really unfair, that those are first-time buyers cannot get on this ladder. Sorry, again, I'm very passionate.
Sorry, it makes it confusing for me when you start and stop, but that's your prerogative. But Fox, to be completely there. Have you spoken?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now. I need another question to keep us going. There's a gentleman at the back.
Stand up. I know we've spoken a lot about sort of housing and first-time buyers, but there's also the element of buy-to-let, and I know like a few people who kind of takes away from first-time buyers, people who buy sort of, especially the new ones up at the waterfront. You have people who sort of buy those and then obviously live somewhere else and their places out, and that takes away from first-time buyers. Like myself, I don't live anywhere yet, and there's a lot of that going on the island. And there's also got people who don't live on the island who do the exact same thing. And that again, you have people off island who basically invest in somewhere and capitalise on the rent that gives them. I just wanted to know any plans or sort of restrictions, or if that's even on the sort of radar.
We know what the question is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff, isn't it?
Jeff?
Yeah, it's me. And this one is fairly straightforward to answer, because all I have to do is turn to my housing crisis action plan, and there are 3 actions right at the top here. Require private developers to reserve a portion of homes they build to be sold to first-time buyers and downsizers rather than buy-to-let investors. Require the Jersey Development Company review their proposals for developments on South Hill and the waterfront to maximise the contribution of affordable homes delivered. Change the planning rules to require 100% of the homes built on publicly owned land to be for affordable housing instead of being sold to investors. It seems to me that this government, which I hope is an outgoing government, has actually just sold the island to external developers. Thank you.
When my husband and I went to go and buy our flat, which is actually on a long-term lease on parish-owned land, the people in front of us were actually buying 3 of them. So we felt actually quite disheartened, because potentially they got the more affordable places. I don't know. Like Jeff said, our Housing Crisis Action Plan does intend to tackle this issue. We know that there are a lot of first-time buyers out there that are waiting for their first home. And we've got government-owned land that is there ready to be developed, and it should be developed for affordable housing for first-time buyers, and also for social housing as well, social rented housing as well.
10 seconds.
The cost of rent as well coming down, and us being able to stop above inflation rent increases should help people like yourself be able to save for a deposit as well. Conscious that that's something that is very important to young people.
Yeah, we need to ban foreign buy-to-let. We cannot have that fixed market on this island. One of the issues of buy-to-let is if you are renting, you're paying the mortgage on that for that person plus a bit extra, and as that mortgage capital goes down, you don't see your rent go down, you see your rent go up, and so the disparity between the two increases all the time, and all you're doing is giving more of your hard-earned income to an individual constantly. This is a small island. The market forces in large places don't work here in the same way in a fixed housing market, and what's happening is that young people like yourselves are losing out on that, and that's why we're getting that drain of young people leaving the island, because you simply can't have the right to somewhere to live. You go and rent, you have to renew your lease yearly. That needs to be changed. You need to have security of tenure in your home, and you need to have a home, not an investment, a home so that you can grow and you can have a brighter future on this island. Reform Jersey are going to give you that.
Thank you. I'm appalled when I see certain estate agents actually advertising properties as lock up and leave. So it's not just the fact that we have investors, we also have outside investors, we've also got investors that are possibly on island that are actually being encouraged to invest in properties, lock them up, leave them so they're not even rented out to people, and then sold on in a few years' time at a significant profit margin. One of the other issues I think is also having this shared transfer option on properties. This has allowed a lot of people to invest who don't necessarily aren't local. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at getting rid of, and also having entitled and non-entitled accommodation. I think for a long time that's been used as a way to control the population because governments haven't wanted to, and I think getting rid of those two categories would also help open up the property market and the supply. Thank you.
This gentleman here, young gentleman, you're exactly the people that JLC and the Progress Party want to help. We're looking at equity schemes that are really successful in the UK where you can buy a piece and then end up buying the rest of it. There's a lot of vacant properties. I mean, since the 70s, when I was young, these houses, they're still vacant. I want to know why. I want to know who lives in them and why there's no one living in them. I want to know how many. I want to see brown fields built. First-time buyers, not green fields, brown fields. There are plenty. We need to get on with the job. I want to see unqualified and qualified properties with the same dignity. I helped a friend the other week who's lived here for 10 years.
10
Jersey,
seconds.
And it's a dump. We've got a lot of work to get on with, but I want to help people like you.
Sorry, hang a second.
Okay, so Jersey Development Company should not be allowed to build the quantity of luxury houses they build and sell to just buy to let, and particularly to overseas. They should be forced to build at least 50% just for social housing, particularly first-time buyers, and those 50% shouldn't be sold to buy to let. Also, we should be talking about taxing people that have second homes in Jersey. And in fact, we've got a potential chief minister who has a family home in London and has a second home here in Jersey. So this is the sort of example that we need to set, that we should be taxing these people. In Cornwall and in Wales, second homes are taxed up to 3 or 4 times more than the locals' homes, because they have a situation there where there are so many holiday lets and holiday homes that the locals can't afford to buy houses. There's just housing scarcity. So we need to build more social housing, and we need to put tax leverage on to stop the buy-to-let market, and particularly to stop overseas investors. Thank you.
It's not often I actually agree with one of my reform colleagues, but I have to agree that this non-quali and quali arrangement has to come to an end. I have one of my members of staff who has got his girlfriend, and another friend of mine rang me today and offered me one of her apartments, he couldn't have it because he hasn't been here 5 years. He's been working for me for 4 years. I don't see why they should be penalised. I think it should be a level playing field whether you've been here 4 years or anything longer. We also, within the Jersey Alliance, want to create a scheme to help with first-time buyers who are finding it difficult to raise the deposit. So that is in our manifesto, and also, again, we need to stop foreign buyers investing in property in Jersey.
Okay. Yep. So I'm going to stand up this time so I can see you. Sorry, how old are you? 24. 24. It is incredibly important that we have young people in Jersey stay in Jersey and see a future here. Getting back to the buy-to-let scenario, apparently there was a question held in the States Assembly about how many of them were held by foreign investors, and the answer came back, no, hardly any. It's all done by Jersey locals, which, to be honest with you, I don't trust and don't believe, and I would like that to be revisited. It is inappropriate that this government has built the whole of the seafront, the whole of it, okay, and not addressed really the availability of housing that we know is there. The brownfield sites, we know there's 2,000 dwellings. That has been ignored.
10 seconds.
And we have seen investment properties, and I'm disgusted with what's happened. JDC should not be involved in trying to make a profit. It's not a government arm. That should be left to the private sector, and they should sell that land rather than try and build it.
My reform colleagues have already said what we plan to do to put a curb on these buy-to-lets. Unfortunately, Jersey has been used as an investment opportunity by lots of people for the last few decades without any limits, it seems. People could just buy by share transfer, pushing all the prices up. I think the share transfer is being stopped on new properties, but I don't think it's being stopped on other properties at the moment. So that may slow things down a bit. Also, I mean, the idea of people coming and buying property who aren't even here is just ridiculous, because that money, that rent that's paid, goes straight out of the island. That's money that could have been spent here. It just goes out of Jersey.
10 seconds.
Some of that is actually taxpayers' money, which is paid through income support. So working people in Jersey are paying people who don't live here, who happen to own a property and rent it out.
Time's up. I think everyone asked the question. Okay, so we move on to the next question. Okay, I mean, I'm happy to carry on if anyone has a question, or we're happy to wrap it up here, and then give you an opportunity to speak to each of the individual candidates. So,
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So if we have no more questions, I'd just like to close the session by thanking the candidates for answering the questions as thoroughly as they have.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard.
And I'd just like to thank the audience for participating, and I think the candidates worked very hard for you. I think you should put your hands together and give them a round of applause.
Can I just say thank you? Thank you to Richard for stepping in at the last minute, because you know, it was about half an hour beforehand, and just say thanks for that, because it's not an easy thing to do, and for his knowledge of technology as well. It's very
Thank you.